Penn State may have found itself a star in the making at wide receiver. Well, Zach, how can you say that? Trevor Pena isn't even with the team yet. That's not who I'm referring to.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there. My name is Zach Sako, and I'm your host of the show, bringing you some blue-white game takeaways. So James Franklin called it out, called out the linebacker spot in his press conference. So what is the concern there? There might be a clear leader for QB2 between Jackson Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer, but I want to start with the wide receiver spot. Trevor Pena comes in. There's a star in the making at wide receiver, but that's not who I'm talking about. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. So let's begin with wide receiver. That player that I am referring to is a different transfer wide receiver. It's not Tyser Denmark, okay? Even though there's up and coming, I think he has plenty of talent as a younger wide receiver that will certainly be a focal point in this offense sooner rather than later. It's not Kyron Hudson either. I already said it's not Pena. It's Devontae Ross. Devontae Ross is that star in the making at wide receiver for this Penn State offense. Ross comes in and Zach, that's a group of 5 wide receiver. He played ball at Troy. How good can he be? I'll let Andy Kotelnicki and Penn State decide that, because Ross has the speed, the versatility that they need to move him around in the offense, to be a reliable weapon. Drew Aller, out of all of the receivers, now granted, Luke Reynolds did not play in this blue-white game, and he's frankly missed most of spring camp, so we'll address that later on, try to get to the bottom of that, but he's been unavailable for most of spring ball. Hopefully nothing concerning there, but the point is that in his absence, a reliable target had to step up. Kyron Hudson's going to be a good player. I'm eager to see what impact Trevor Pena can have once he's in the fold, but he is arriving late. That's where Devontae Ross steps up, because he came in with winter workouts, spring ball, played a full spring camp with Penn State. So there was that time to build chemistry, to strengthen relationships, to learn Andy Kotelnicki's playbook and just get situated. Okay, because a group of 5 wide receiver, he's got to be able to adapt and adjust to the Power 4 level, and you see it with Devontae Ross. He gets separation. That's going to be key. The speed, and most people are going to look at Devontae Ross and say, oh, he's just a speed threat. And initially that would have been my take too, is that this is the replacement for Amari Evans. You need a deep threat, somebody that can stretch the football field, that can just use that blazing speed to get by the defense, to force somebody to leave a safety back. That's going to be part of his game. But Ross is more than just a speed threat at wide receiver. They were lining him up in the boundary. They were lining him up in the slot. They were using him in jet sweeps. What Ross was able to do was more than just, hey, go chase down a go route, go on a go route, go chase a deep ball from Drew Aller. That's what we learned about Ross from that blue-white game, is that he is going to be used in a variety of ways. That speed is going to help separate him. I mean, he was flying wide open at times, just on basic short intermediate routes. He was taking those jet sweeps, those trick plays, as I had mentioned. Penn State did some fairly vanilla with its offense, right? Andy Kotelnicki's not going to show everything, every card in the deck. But you started to see some wrinkles here and there, and Devontae Ross was one of those focal points. It was honestly, it felt like the main focal point in Penn State's passing game. It seemed like him and Drew Aller were in sync the most, but it helps when Ross is just running around wide open, and Aller has no choice but to throw him the football because he's completely wide open. Some good timing routes on the boundary. Aller, I remember one play specifically where Aller threw, it was about a 15-yard out. Ross was out of his cut. It seemed like he was surprised in the moment, but the ball was just right there, right on the money. And Ross was able to get both feet in bounds to complete the catch. And maybe it was 20 yards, but it was basically an intermediate out route with perfect timing between Ross and Aller. And that connection's only going to get better. Let's speak to the wide receiver situation as a whole, because has this become a strength? It seems like it is now because you add Trevor Pena, who is a good slot receiver. This guy's going to start. But I still think there's going to be a time adjustment. You have to bring him in, get him situated because he missed all of spring camp. That's an opportunity to, like I said with Ross and Hudson, build chemistry, learn the playbook, get in sync with Drew Aller. You're only going to be able to do that so much over summer. Now, granted, it's not impossible, but it's an uphill battle. So Pena has his work cut out for him. But Penn State has this trio of wide receivers that, are they elite? Maybe not necessarily. But Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross, and Trevor Pena in conjunction with Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, 2 NFL caliber running backs in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, and one of the most experienced quarterbacks in college football with Drew Aller at the helm. Wide receiver, it just got a whole lot better with Trevor Pena coming in here. But you factor in that Ross is better than anticipated. He's not just a one-trick wide receiver. He's not just a speed threat. They are going to utilize him, and he will be an X factor in games. Do not forget about Kyron Hudson. Kyron Hudson made some good plays as well, had some good routes, but he's your possession receiver. He is going to be catching traffic, tough blocker on the outside for Penn State. Devontae Ross certainly opens up the field. He's going to stretch the field for Penn State's offense, and then that opens up the running game by consequence because you got to leave a safety back. You can't bring that extra defender down in the box. So that's what Ross's speed can do. But it's also putting him into motion and moving him around the formation. Andy Kotelnicki is going to like these 3 receivers all at one point in time. Back to Trevor Pena, though, and his impact. Okay, so you get another starting caliber veteran wide receiver. You just make the wide receiver room better as a whole. The depth gets better. 3 veteran playmakers to start. Hudson's going to be your X. Ross is going to be your Z, but you can put him in the slot. Pena is going to be your starting slot receiver. I'm saying that Ross gives you that versatility. He's not just, like I said, you don't just send him on a go route every single time. You can use him in a variety of ways in the passing game and in the running game, as we saw at the blue-white game. But now you don't have to put that pressure on Tyser Denmark if he's not ready, because Tyser Denmark had a good game for what it was worth. Him and Ethan Grunkemeyer had that similar connection. So Drew Aller and Devontae Ross, their connection stood out. Grunkemeyer and Tyser Denmark certainly were in sync. And we're going to talk about that QB2 battle in just a moment, so be ready for that. But then you have those 3 starters, and your depth gets a whole lot better because now Liam Clifford can cycle in as opposed to being a starter. Same thing with a Caden Saunders. Tyser Denmark, Kobe Howard, I think, can contribute at some point in time, but you don't want him to right away. You still want Tyser Denmark and Kobe Howard to progress into their roles as opposed to a baptism by fire scenario where you just say, okay, go out there and be difference makers. And I think you still need to build their confidence and their experience at this level, but they certainly have the potential. This helps across the board. Penn State's wide receiver room. Now with Trevor Pena in the fold, I've said it before that I don't think he's a superstar player, Pena, but he gives you what you need him to. Another weapon within the offense that defenses have to pay attention to. So you can't double cover one guy and let everybody else run free. That's not how it's going to work. It's almost like a pick your poison scenario where you have everybody that I just named. Ross, Pena, Hudson, Luke Reynolds, Khalil Dinkins, Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen. Mentioned Quentin Martin. Thought Quentin Martin had a great spring game. So wide receiver has slowly become a strength. It's not an afterthought anymore. It is not the weakest link on this team. This group, Marcus Higgins deserves credit. Penn State deserves credit for getting it together, and it's trending in the right direction going into the season. Still got more to discuss, as behind Drew Aller, there's uncertainty with Beau Pribula. Now at Missouri, there's a wide open quarterback 2 job. And based on the spring game alone, the blue-white game, there is a clear leader after all was said and done. I'll tell you who it was and why coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel, you place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. That's right, $250 in bonus bets. You'll love using FanDuel because FanDuel makes betting so easy. Whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into your favorite player props, and that's anything, 3-pointers, steals, assists, rebounds, you name it, FanDuel has so many ways for you to bet on your favorite players and your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, so even if you miss the start of game time, you can even combine your live prop bets into a same game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That's right, $250 in bonus bets over at FanDuel.com. Still to come on the show, we're going to address those concerns at linebacker. If it wasn't a concern, James Franklin wouldn't have called it out in his press conference, right? We'll talk about that in the final segment. Let's get back to this QB2 battle. Franklin reiterated it in his press conference also, that Jackson Smolik and Ethan Grunkemeyer are in a neck-and-neck battle for the QB2 spot. That's great news across the board because it means that your depth chart is in a solid spot. You have Drew Allar as your QB1, unquestioned. Okay. But the fact that Smolik is pushing Grunkemeyer, because most people would assume that, all right, it's going to go from Drew Allar to Grunkemeyer, Jackson Smolik, okay, he's another quarterback in the room. He's forgotten about because he dealt with that leg injury all of last season. But if I had to pick somebody from this game that stood out the most, it would be Jackson Smolik. Smolik had a great blue-white game, running with the ones, and everybody got their turn. Everybody got their turn with the first string offense. Drew Allar, Grunkemeyer, Smolik. But Smolik showed no hesitation, no caution with the leg injury. He was moving very well. You would never know that he had a leg injury. The best play of the day was when he rolled out to his non-throwing side, his left side. He's a righty quarterback. And off his back foot, because pressure was chasing him down, threw an absolute dime to true freshman wide receiver Lyric Samuel, who was wide open downfield. So to evade the pressure, roll out to his left, his non-dominant side, throw off of his back foot, and complete a strike to true freshman Lyric Samuel, recognizing that he had beaten the coverage for the first touchdown of the blue-white game. Smolik is not just a QB3, where he's just another arm in the room. This guy is legitimately in contention for QB2. That's not coach speak. That's not trying to keep people from jumping into the transfer portal. No, there's legitimately, because I can understand that. If you're James Franklin, you don't want to lose either of Grunkemeyer or Smolik to the portal because you know who your QB2 is. But truly, we don't at this point in time. If we're going based off of the spring game, it is Jackson Smolik. Now, that's not to say that Grunkemeyer had a bad game. I thought Grunk, when he was able to find his rhythm, was really good. But there were times, okay, who made more mistakes in that game? It was Grunk. I felt like Smolik played near mistake-free football and made the flashiest plays of the day. He would have been my blue-white game MVP because it wasn't televised. Were they even keeping stats? I'm not entirely sure. But Smolik looked like the best QB of the day. He had a better performance, and sometimes that happens. You'll just remember that this is a controlled scrimmage. This is a glorified practice. I'm only going to overreact to this so much. That's not me saying that Allar had a bad game. I'm concerned about him. Grunkemeyer's not developing the way that he needs to. No, this is about Smolik doing things well and proving anybody that doubts him as far as how legitimate he is within this quarterback room. If we're going simply off the blue-white game, Jackson Smolik is QB2. If we're going off of Ethan Grunkemeyer is the better prospect, these two basically trade days back and forth where Grunkemeyer probably has a better practice one day and then Smolik follows it up. That's what happened here at Blue White, is that Smolik just had the better spring practice. There was a difference. It was a really good performance across the board from Smolik. He's got legs. Don't think that this is just, okay, he's a small quarterback, he's a pocket passer. Guy can move. Like I said, no lingering effects from that leg injury. Jackson Smolik makes this QB battle interesting. It's not going to be handed to Grunkemeyer. Let me talk about the positives, regardless of who is nominated as QB2. You have depth. One of them could transfer out, possibly, eventually, hypothetically, but the transfer portal is closed. So looking at this season, you have 3 competent, capable quarterbacks. You have Aller, who's going to be your starter. But what if you get into a scenario again where you're Penn State, you're on the road against Wisconsin, or let's think about Iowa 2021 with Taquan Roberson. That's what they're trying to avoid. But now you have not 1, but 2 reliable backups behind Aller. So if Aller needs to go out of a game, has to miss some time, right? I'm not trying to speak it into an existence, but we saw it happen. We all saw it happen in real time. And Beau Pribula was ready and was prepared. Penn State has 2 of those. 2 of those kinds of quarterbacks. Whether it's QB2 or QB3, it doesn't matter how you order them. If Smolik's the first guy up after Aller, which he was in this blue-white game, if we really want to read into that, Aller went first, and then it was Smolik. Just saying, if you want to read into it that way, I think that's the veteran. I think that has to do with the fact that Smolik has spent more time within the program than Grunk. That's just a kind of a veteran thing, probably. But James Franklin keeps reiterating that this one's close. They're right there. They're neck and neck. And this is going to carry into fall camp before they even decide. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a rotation. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest that if one week, hey, I'm not saying they're going to alternate back and forth, but that this competition might even go beyond just the end of fall camp, where you're going to see these 2 continue to compete and push one another to make sure that they get more reps and are ready to go within a game. We'll see how it all unfolds. I think most people will probably pick Grunkemeyer. Do not count out Smolik. I'm not here to declare a QB2 either. I'm just letting you know what I saw at the spring game. I saw a quarterback in Smolik that looked like he could be legitimately QB2, and it would not shock me if Penn State says, yeah, our depth chart's going to be Aller, Smolik, and Grunkemeyer in that order. Do not be shocked if that's the case. As for some other standout players, I already mentioned Quentin Martin. Quentin Martin looks like RB3 to me. Corey Smith got a lot of run with the scout team, but Quentin Martin was running with the ones. I think that tells me a lot. It's the patience. It's the vision. He's really matured as a running back. I liked what I saw from Martin. When the depth chart is officially released, or we get a semblance of a depth chart, I expect it to be Singleton and Allen and Quentin Martin as that 3rd running back, which is another co-starter because Penn State's going to run a lot of running backs this upcoming season. Quentin Martin looked the part of being that next man up after Singleton and Allen. I thought a player that stood out, Yvonne Kemaju, and that's probably not the direction that most people thought I was going to go in. Kemaju, that's a 3-star defensive lineman, 4-star, 3-star, 4-star, but somebody that was a little bit of a tweener, where he was a defensive end, but he's pretty heavy, so maybe he grows into that defensive tackle role. He was out there with the first-string defense. I understand. Deny Dennis Sutton did not participate in spring ball. He's probably rehabbing some form of injury. He was just unavailable. Maybe he was just taking some time off. Okay. He's played a lot of college football to this point. Maybe he's earned it where he doesn't have to go through the rigmarole of spring camp. Besides my point, Kemaju as the first defensive end that was up after him, true freshman defensive end that seemed like, hey, this was going to be a work in progress that he was going to have to develop. And Penn State seems very much like they are going to give him the green light as they do that for the true freshman. Green light, yellow light, red light. You're using your red shirt. Kemaju at this point in time looks like he's going to, and made some plays too, is going to be a factor on the depth chart at that strong side defensive end for the time being. So if it's denied Dennis Sutton and then true freshman Yvonne Kemaju, it's looking that way, at least at the moment. Vabu Torre made a lot of plays. Darius Dixon. These are some young guys in the secondary. I like what I saw from Darius Dixon when he this is the modern day, the California defensive back, cornerback, 4-star, arguably the best prospect, objectively the best prospect in the class of 2025. Early enrollee, lowered the boom, laid right into Josiah Brown. And it was a massive hit, clean hit, textbook. And even better, Josiah Brown popped right up, held on to the catch, and pointed for the first down. So Darius Dixon made a great play in coverage to try to break up the pass. Josiah Brown held on to it, but it just shows Dixon's closing speed, shows that he's not afraid to make a play. He's not afraid to make a hit. He also broke up a drive on third down, had a nice pass breakup to force a punt by the first team offense. Dixon looked really good. Vabu Torre, I want to shout him out because Torre had an interception in this game. He was around the line of scrimmage. So that complete safety that plays back in coverage, able to read the eyes of the quarterback, but then come down into the box and make a play. It just speaks to the depth that I've already mentioned that, hey, this secondary is a really deep group. And Vabu Torre hasn't been someone that I've been mentioning very often, very frequently. Maybe he's somebody that also gets a little more run in this defense because there's a lot of depth in the secondary, but it's unproven, or I guess it's uncertain in an extent what order it's going to be in. So Torre had a nice game that's certainly going to help his stock going into the season. James Franklin called out the linebackers and that was something I was not expecting. He blatantly made an open pitch to somebody in the transfer portal that Penn State needs a linebacker. Come to LBU. What does it mean? Why is there concern around this group? We're going to talk about that plus defensive tackle coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets. Even when demand is going to be sky high, prices on the app will actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and the last-minute deals can save you up to, get this, 60%. That's right, 60%. Here's why you will enjoy using Game Time. You'll have last-minute deals. You can save up to 60%, as I mentioned, off buying last-minute tickets for sports, but not only sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it. And then all-in pricing means you get no surprise fees at checkout. So what you see is what you pay for. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. Again, that is code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Bold statement by James Franklin in his blue-white press conference. We need a linebacker, simply put. And I have my reservations about the linebacker group simply from the depth part of it. Here's why this has taken a turn for, I guess, the worse, or it's taken a step backwards because, and James Franklin even openly admitted this in his press conference, that they were blindsided by the Tamir Robinson transfer. He didn't say that, but without naming Tamir Robinson, he said, hey, we were surprised that we were going to lose somebody at linebacker. Essentially what he said. This group with Dom DeLuca and when they get Tony Rojas back and Keon Wiley, I actually like that. I really do like that first three trio. I like as co-starters. They'll rotate in. Tony Rojas and Dom DeLuca will most likely be your two starters. Keon Wiley will be that next linebacker up because I'm a big Keon Wiley fan. He was supposed to be a breakout player a season ago, dealt with an injury, and ultimately was not available for the entirety of the season. I'm going to buy into Keon Wiley again and say that he will have that breakout season now. Penn State runs a 4-2-5. So the strength lies within the secondary, or else you wouldn't use that extra defensive back. So at linebacker, fortunately for Penn State, if there are any depth concerns or if Penn State is worried about linebackers, clearly James Franklin is. So just because I like this starting trio at linebacker, maybe James Franklin isn't sold on that, which is why he makes an open pitch to say if there's somebody in the portal that's a linebacker and wants to come and play at Penn State, let's talk. Where that concern lies, I suppose, is the actual numbers of the group, because Tamir Robinson does, not being here, throws a wrench into that. After Dom DeLuca and Keon Wiley and Tony Rojas, I think Tony Rojas is going to be an all-conference player. Dom DeLuca can certainly be an all-conference player. Keon Wiley, I think, has that breakout season. But what can Anthony Speca give you? He was somebody that Franklin said had one of the most complete spring camps, meaning that he had essentially one of the best spring camps of individual football players. Okay, that's good. There's your fourth linebacker if you want to group them into pairs. I guess that's where the uncertainty is after that, because there's your two deep. You run a 4-2-5 and your two deep is set. But what if you did run a 4-3? You only have four linebackers that you can really rely on. I think Kari Jackson has a bright future. LeVar Arrington II is going to be a fan favorite. He clearly was at the blue-white game. LeVar Arrington II, I think, deserves some credit as a standout player as well. Had broken up a pass. He's just so athletic. Arrington certainly needs to adjust to the speed of the game. And I don't mean that from an athleticism. I mean in terms of processing. Okay, where's the play going? Where's my assignment? What's the quarterback doing? Or who's my man? That kind of thing. In terms of processing the game, he will catch up to that. Same thing with Alex Tatch. That's another young up-and-coming linebacker. So this group will eventually be a massive strength for Penn State, because if this group stays together between Arrington, because there's the transfer portal, so I got to speak in hypotheticals here. But if you keep this nucleus of Kari Jackson, LeVar Arrington II, Alex Tatch, Cam Smith's coming in, right? He's going to enroll. It would have been nice to have him as an early enrollee, but that's another 4-star linebacker coming into the room. A lot of young talent. A lot of it's unproven, and I don't think that James Franklin feels like he can trust all of them past Anthony Speca. And to an extent, Speca kind of falls into that category of he's unproven. How is he going to adjust with an increased role? He's developing correctly. He's on the right path. Can he handle the workload, though? So I think they have three truly trustworthy linebackers there between Rojas, Wiley, and Dom DeLuca, and they're going to rotate in. Those are your three co-starters, if you will. After that, you have a lot of players, and I like their upside. I like their potential, but that only gets you so much. So James Franklin wouldn't have done that if he didn't think Penn State needed a linebacker. I like what they have, and I didn't think linebacker was that big of a concern. Was it a question mark? Absolutely, but I didn't think it was that concerning. Franklin says otherwise. Even with Tamir Robinson in or out of the fold. Obviously, the group was in a much better standing when he was there, but that group takes a step backwards with Robinson not there, because I thought he was the fourth linebacker after Rojas, DeLuca, Wiley. The same thing can be said for defensive tackles, so clearly Penn State doesn't think that's as much of an issue. Where James Franklin and Penn State and company say, hey, linebacker needs attention, I've been saying that it's defensive tackle, because James Franklin didn't make that kind of statement about the DTs. It's a similar type of setup. You have Zane Durant as your superstar, all-conference player, maybe even All-America. Zane Durant and Tony Rojas are the leaders, the face of their respective position groups, right? You're expecting that Rojas takes a step forward, but he missed spring camp, so he's got to play catch-up a little bit there. Zane Durant was completely active, so he becomes that superstar player. Xavier Gilliam is kind of like an Anthony Speca, where his role is going to increase. Is he going to be ready to go? You're not going to know until you get into action. Alonzo Ford's coming back from injury. Alonzo Ford, all-conference player. When he's at full strength, all-conference player. So those first three, between Durant, Ford, Gilliam, not bad. Actually, pretty good. I'd say above average. After that, if you lose one or two players to injury, what is your solution? Owen Wafel, Liam Andrews, DeAndre Cook, a variety of players were making selective plays here and there. Remember, there's only so much to read into between a controlled scrimmage and then the first string offense, defense going up against the scout team offense and defense. Okay, so you should expect the starters, the first string players, to win those matchups 9 times out of 10. Even though I was impressed, I thought the scout offense and defense gave the starters, the first string groups, a run for their money on both sides of the football. They did not look like a bunch of pushovers. They looked like guys ready to play, and they were fighting for snaps and reps. Besides that, defensive tackle, though, it's this group over time will go from a liability to a strength. And one of the reasons why Penn State is going to be stronger in the future. Linebacker, that applies to that. Same thing at defensive tackle. They are not devoid of depth. They have plenty of depth. Like I said, I can name all these different contributors, but what kind of impact are you going to get from them? Ty Blanding, Owen Wafel, Caleb Artis, DeAndre Cook, Liam Andrews, Randy Adarica. I'll tell you who I think has the most potential at the end of the day out of that next rotation of defensive tackles. It's probably Liam Andrews and Randy Adarica. If I had to name that fourth defensive tackle right now, probably Ty Blanding. I think that the third and fourth DTs, Gilliam and Blanding. Eventually, though, you would like to see Liam Andrews maybe later in the season. So let me give everybody the optimistic outlook, light at the end of the tunnel type of deal. The young players will get better. That's what happens. That's at least how it's supposed to happen. So as the season progresses, if these guys get in-game action, they'll have their difficulties. You'll see those growing pains, the inexperience really show up early in the season, middle of the season. But these questionable position groups can get better, and they will get better. It's just how quickly do they get better? And when you need them to play their best football, it's kind of like I bring up the offensive line. That was a group middle of the road, average. Okay, they had a good game here and there, but they were never dominant. And then boom, it all clicked in the playoffs. When they needed to play their best football, Penn State's offensive line put it all together. Maybe you can expect that from the linebackers and defensive tackles. If depth is intact, if for the most part everybody's healthy, which the offensive line was for the most part, aside from Anthony Donko, that group turned the corner when it mattered most. I'm not saying that defensive tackle and linebacker will be these outstanding strengths for Penn State, but maybe they won't be liabilities when they get into week 11, week 12, conference championship, playoffs. Okay. So that's the optimistic outlook for these groups. But Penn State needs answers at linebacker and defensive tackle. You need depth for that reassurance. It's why Penn State went and got a wide receiver there. James Franklin makes his plea for a linebacker, and they would want a defensive tackle, but it has to be the right fit. So there's your blue-white game takeaways in a nutshell. Plenty to discuss and plenty more to discuss. This is only the beginning as we wrap up spring camp and begin to preview for Penn State season. They're chasing after a national title. National title is on the line. A lot to look forward to. It'll be an exciting season for the Nittany Lions, and I'm going to talk about it all throughout the offseason and leading up to it here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for checking out this episode. Thank you for letting me know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around all your favorite Penn State sports teams. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Now, for your second listen and watch, got to check out The Portal with host Brian Smith. This is Locked On show dedicated to everything transfer portal, everything recruiting related in college football. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes in the college football landscape. You can find The Portal on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.